A father's whispered words to his drunken son. A daughter's medals clutched in trembling hands, and between them, a man whose final breath carried a secret that would shatter everything they thought they knew about sacrifice, Santa Esperanza. A mining town where men disappeared into the earth each morning, praying they'd see sunlight again. Don Melchor was one of them, 65 years carved into leather skin, hands that hadn't been soft in decades. Every step home from the mine felt heavier than the last, boots dragging through dust that seemed to pull him backward. But he never stopped, because waiting at that weathered door were two faces that made the darkness bearable. Papa, Nicholas and Rosa would crash into his legs, their laughter the only music that mattered. He'd scoop them up despite the fire in his shoulders, despite lungs that wheezed with each breath. Their mother was gone, had been for years, leaving him to be both protector and nurturer. The stove became his second workplace. Clumsy fingers that wielded pickaxes now attempting to season rice and stretch thin cuts of meat into something resembling a meal. "Nothing worth having comes easy," he'd tell them while they ate, words he repeated like prayers. Study, learn, build something better than this. His own education had ended in childhood, sacrificed so his siblings could eat. He refused to let history repeat itself. Time moved like water through cupped hands, impossible to hold. Rosa grew with her father's determination burning in her eyes, books stacked beside her bed like treasure. But Nicholas began slipping through different doors, coming home later, eyes glazed with things that had nothing to do with studying. The friends who waited for him at corners wore trouble like cologne. "Come back to school," Don Melchor pleaded one night, catching his son's arm. The smell of alcohol made his stomach turn. "These people, they're leading you nowhere good," Nicholas jerked away. "Stop controlling me, old man." "I'm done with your lectures." The words hit harder than any rockfall in the mine. Don Melchor stood there, watching his son stumble away, and felt something crack inside his chest that had nothing to do with damaged lungs. Rosa was different. She absorbed every lesson, every sacrifice, transformed them into fuel. When the scholarship letter arrived, full ride, studying abroad, Don Melchor held it with shaking hands. His daughter was leaving. The thought carved him hollow. "Papa, I can't accept this," Rosa said, seeing the numbers. "The expenses, you've earned this." His voice was iron. "I'll handle everything. This is your future. Don't you dare turn it down." So she left. And the house grew quieter. And Nicholas grew worse. The cantina became Don Melchor's second pilgrimage. After 16-hour shifts breaking rock, he'd walk those extra miles to find his son slumped in corners, surrounded by laughter that sounded like breaking glass. He'd lift Nicola, heavier every time, and half carry him home, tucking him into bed like he was 7 again. Then back to the mine, back to the darkness. The cycle never ended. Nicholas never said thank you. Only asked for more money, more freedom, more of everything except responsibility. The collapse happened on a Tuesday. One moment Don Melchor was swinging his pickaxe. The next, the ground tilted sideways and black spots devoured his vision. He woke to worried faces and fluorescent lights that hurt his eyes. "Your lungs," the doctor said, and his tone carried finality. "Years of mining dust. There's extensive damage. You have limited time." "I'm sorry," Don Melchor nodded slowly. He'd felt death circling for months now, patient as a vulture. The confirmation barely registered. He was already thinking about Nicholas, about whether his son would understand before it was too late. He found him that evening at the usual spot, but this time Don Melchor stayed in the shadows, unseen, and heard words that would haunt his final days. "My old man?" Nicholas laughed, bitter and cruel. "Guy's an embarrassment. Look at him. Same torn clothes, same pathetic shoes held together with wire. I'm ashamed to call him my father." His friends laughed. Nicholas laughed with them. Don Melchor looked down at himself. At the shirt with patches on patches. At the boots he'd resoled 4 times because new ones meant choosing between his pride and his children's meals. He'd always chosen them, and this was his reward. Shame? Disgust. He walked home in silence. Tears carved clean tracks through the dust on his face. Inside the empty house, surrounded by memories that suddenly felt like accusations, Don Melchior made a decision that would change everything. The notary didn't ask questions when he signed the papers. The house, built with his own hands, filled with ghosts of better times, sold within days. He took half the money and sent it to Rosa's university account. An investment in the one child who'd stayed true. He wrote only one letter to Nicholas. Short. Simple. Devastating. Son, I'm leaving. I tried to be enough for you. My clothes embarrassed you. I wore them so you could have better. My shoes made you ashamed. I kept them so you could walk further than I ever did. I've loved you with everything I had. That will never change. This house is gone. Don't look for me. Be better. I believe in you. He left it on the kitchen table, packed one worn bag, and walked away from the only home his children had ever known. The city hospice was sterile and cold. They gave him a bed, medication that dulled the constant ache, and windows that looked out on nothing he recognized. Staff came and went with professional sympathy. He told no one where he'd come from, spoke to no one about the children he'd raised alone, just waited for the ending he could feel approaching. 2 years passed like fever dreams. Rosa returned home a graduate, medals around her neck and fire in her heart. She wanted to show her father everything he'd made possible, wanted to collapse into his arms and say, "We did it." But the house was occupied by strangers. Her childhood bedroom belonged to someone else's memories now. Where's Don Melchior? She asked every neighbor, desperation rising like floodwater. An old man finally told her about Nicholas. The drinking, the cruel words. The night their father had overheard himself being mocked. How Don Melchior had sold everything and disappeared into silence. Rosa found Nicholas exactly where she expected, slumped in that same cantina. Wasting the life their father had bled to give him. How could you? The words erupted from her like violence. He gave you everything, and you made him feel worthless. Nicholas stared through her with eyes that couldn't quite focus. Didn't understand, didn't care. She called the police. Let them take him. Felt no satisfaction in it. Then she began searching. Every hospice, every hospital, every shelter and clinic in the region. The doctor from their hometown had said her father's lungs were failing, that he probably hadn't survived. But Rosa refused to believe in endings she hadn't witnessed. She found him on a rainy Thursday in a facility 40 miles from home. A nurse led her down hallways that smelled like antiseptic and resignation. Opened a door. There he was, Don Melchior. Smaller than she remembered, breathing through a mask that hissed with each labored inhale. But his eyes, when they found her, still held that warmth that had carried her through childhood. Papa. The word broke her. He smiled behind the plastic, reached out with hands that trembled worse than leaves in wind. She rushed forward, medals clattering against her chest, diploma clutched in shaking fingers. Look, I did it. Because of you, all of this is because of you. His eyes filled with tears that spilled onto cracked lips. Pride and sorrow mixing into something too complex for words. I'm staying, Rosa promised. I'm never leaving you again. No. His voice was barely a whisper through the mask. One more thing, please. Bring Nicholas. I need to see my son. Rosa recoiled like he'd struck her. He doesn't deserve... Please, it wasn't a request. It was a dying man's final wish, and she couldn't refuse him. The prison officials made an exception. Compassionate release for a final visit. Nicholas emerged thinner, eyes carrying something new, maybe the first hints of awareness, maybe just fear. Rosa didn't speak to him during the drive, didn't trust herself not to scream. The hospice room felt smaller with 3 people. Don Melchor's face transformed when Nicholas entered, everything else falling away except joy.
Pure, inexplicable joy. My children, he breathed.
Together.
My family, Rosa wept silently.
Nicholas stood frozen, staring at the man he'd destroyed. Don Melchor fumbled with something beside his bed, pulled out a package wrapped in newspaper, fingers barely managing to grip it, extended it toward Nicholas with shaking hands. "For you," he whispered.
"Always."
"For you." Nicholas took it, and in that moment, package in his hands, father's smile on his face, Don Melchor exhaled one final time. The heart monitor's steady beep stretched into a single, eternal tone. "No." Rosa's anguish filled the room.
"Papa, no, please." Nicholas couldn't move, couldn't process.
Just stood there holding the package while his father's body went still. Rosa collapsed against the bed, sobbing into sheets that still held warmth. Nicholas finally remembered the package, tore it open with numb fingers. A letter, and a cloth bag heavy with bills. His father's handwriting swam before his eyes. "My son.
I love you.
I'm sorry I embarrassed you. My clothes, my shoes, they didn't matter.
You mattered.
Your future mattered.
Every torn seam was a choice I made gladly. I never stopped believing in you. This money, it's half of everything I had.
Use it to become who you were meant to be.
Leave those friends who poison you.
Remember the boy you were, the one with dreams.
I know he's still inside you. I'm proud of you. I always was.
Protect your sister.
Love each other. Be happy.
That's all I ever wanted." "Your father," Nicholas crumbled, literally folded in on himself, knees hitting the floor, letter clutched against his chest. The sound that came from him was inhuman. Years of wasted time and poison words, and his father's patient love, all colliding into grief, too massive to contain. "I'm sorry." He gasped it between sobs.
"Papa, I'm so sorry."
"Come back, please. I'll change. I promise I'll change." But Don Melchor was beyond hearing, beyond forgiving, though he'd already forgiven everything. Rosa knelt beside her brother. They held each other in the wreckage of their father's final gift, reunion, the thing he'd wanted more than his own survival. Outside, rain hammered against windows. Inside, 2 children mourned the man who'd loved them past reason, past pain, past his own life. Don Melchor had spent everything.
His health, his dignity, his final breaths.
All of it poured into his children, believing even when Nicholas made it impossible that love could transform. That sacrifice meant something, that his children would find their way back to each other. He died believing he'd failed, never knowing that his last act, bringing them together, was the thing that would save them both. Months later, Nicholas walked out of rehab clean for the first time in years. Rosa was waiting. They'd scattered their father's ashes in the mountains above Santa Esperanza, where the morning light hit first. Some people leave inheritances of money. Don Melchor left something more valuable, a choice. To honor his sacrifice or waste it, to become the people he'd believed they could be, or prove him wrong. Every morning, Nicholas woke up and made that choice. And slowly, painfully, the boy his father had loved began emerging from the wreckage. Because some love doesn't die when the heart stops. It embeds itself in those left behind, waiting to be worthy of it. Drop AI. If you've ever watched someone sacrifice everything for you,
Part 2 of what happened next.
let me know below.